Namaste and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Bhakti Speaks. And today we have a wonderful, great being, dear old friend of mine, Kia Miller. Hello, namaste, Kia.
Namaste, Sridhar. So lovely to be here with you. So lovely. Yes.
Thank you so much. You know, we've known each other for maybe over 20 years. We only get a chance to see each other like in exotic places like India or Mexico and stuff like that. It's amazing how we drop in with each other at the right times, of course, right?
Exactly. Yeah. These mobile lives that we have, I feel like that just reflecting on that today, we spend so much time, all of us, on the road. And it just seems like that's the calling, you know, like so many of the yogis of the past would be just out on the road and sharing and talking with people. So yeah, here we are.
I think that's important to be able to get the message out by traveling and talking to people as opposed to just sitting in a room and just waiting for people to come to a class. But it's various opinions, but let's get into a little bit about your past. A lot of people don't know who Kia Miller is and how you got to where you are now. So if you can give us a little background, that would be great.
Oh gosh, how deep do you want to go? I'll try to keep it.
You can go far. You can go as deep as you think it's going to be relevant to the conversation.
Well, I grew up in the Falkland Islands. They're little British islands off the southeast tip of Argentina. And it was a very small community that I grew up in. My father managed 110,000 acres, 36,000 sheep. There were about 30 people in total in our settlement, as it was called. So my mom went down to the Falkland Islands as a school teacher. And we lived in this tiny community. And so you really learn when you live in small community how to get along with everybody and how vital it is and how interdependent you are. Everybody has a role that has that serves a function for the greater community. And then the smaller communities, you know, in the different areas come together for life celebration. And so that's kind of how I grew up. We didn't lock doors. There was no boogeyman. There was nothing to fear. And apart from, you know, falling in a ditch on a dark night, that's about the worst that could happen to you. Or, you know, have some kind of drunken brawl, you know, if you were older. I was obviously young then. So that's how I grew up. And then the war happened in the Falkland Islands. I was there for it. I was right in the middle of it. And then I moved to England. And shortly afterwards, I finished my schooling, started a modeling career. And then tandem to the modeling career, I became an activist. And I think that was rooted in my experience of the war in the Falkland Islands. And I was particularly an anti-war, anti-nuclear activist. And right about that time as well, I dug deeply into yoga. And I was getting so far into yoga and in a way so radicalized through my activism work that I was no longer very suitable for modeling. I would go for castings and start talking about anti-nuclear issues rather than, you know, just trying to look pretty. So that didn't go down so well. And I started to work in production, directing documentaries, and really interested in bringing issues to the light, whether it was anti-nuclear, whether it was Native American land rights issues. I went into a lot of these things. And then there came a point where I recognized, after shooting something in England that was anti-nuclear based, but I was doing it to support the campaign for nuclear disarmament, but realizing that a lot of the people that were involved in the activism were actually coming from a deep place of their own hurt. And so they were acting out that hurt. And it really struck me when I was about to screen my documentary sacred fire that was linking these nuclear sites with ancient ceremonial sites throughout Great Britain. And my intention was to support and help this campaign, but they were afraid of how they might be portrayed. So they actually threatened me with physical bodily harm if I went ahead with the screening. And it was one of those moments, those aha moments that just clicked for me. And I went, oh, you know, I'm seeing the shadow side of hurt human beings trying to do the right thing, but still being so stuck in their own pain and unconsciousness that they were acting out in the same ways as those that they were acting against, and saying that they were the bad people, so to speak. So I decided at that point that I needed to do things that were about positivity, that were about solutions. And right about then I was digging really deeply into yoga and self-reflection practices, and understanding that, oh, yoga is the way that I can actually go inside and do the work that I need to do. So that became my activism. Okay, go inside, figure out who you are, figure out your pains, your pressure points, your traumas, you know, move through this stuff. And then, you know, I started to teach, and actually that's where a lot of the transformation came. Something about sitting in the neutrality of the seat of the teacher, you know, when we put aside our personality and personal reality and become present and open for those in front of us. That process was so deeply healing for me. And as was the deep, you know, the deep work of really looking at myself and where I was behaving out of integrity and why, and how I could, you know, self-correct. And so in many ways, the activism that I got into in my late teens and early 20s became the fertile ground where for which I really delved deeper into the yogic practice and started to figure out how I wanted to be in the world, and then the kind of change that I could create from the inside out.
What year about was that? What part of?
1997 was when the documentary was to be shown at the International Disarmament Conference in New York. And then I started to dig into deeper yogic practice, 98, 99, 2000. I did my first teacher training in 2003. So that whole time was my transition, if you like, into deepening my own personal practice until I felt like I was ready to take a teacher training, not even thinking that I would teach at the time, just still being on my own personal healing journey. Until somebody said to me, well, it's obvious you're going to teach. And I was like, it is? I didn't see that yet. I wasn't quite ready to be in, you know, in front of people in that way. Yeah.
What do you think constitutes or makes a good teacher, for example?
Well, I would say what makes a good teacher is somebody who has done their own work, because there's a transmission that happens, there's an understanding that happens when you're teaching from your own direct experience versus just teaching book knowledge or sharing something that you learn but you haven't necessarily embodied yet. So I feel like that's really what sets certain teachers apart, is the amount of work they've done within themselves with the practices that gives them a different level of authority, if you like, or just accessibility when they're teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I notice so many teachers that they're just not practicing. They don't have a foundation. They don't have a really deep sadhana. They just hear about yoga. They take a few classes, and of course, they just want to go out there and teach. They don't even know why they want to teach. Maybe they don't have anything else to do in their lives. You know, especially in Southern California, everybody's a yoga teacher or a massage person, or now a kirtan star, right? It's amazing. But
Yeah.
when I see them, I say, well, what is your practice? What does your practice consist of? Who have you spent time with? And where is your teaching coming from?
Well, I feel very blessed that the first, lineage, if you like, that I got into was Ashtanga, and it's very discipline based. And so I had to learn to become a morning person. I was never a morning person. I had to get up and get in and be at the studio at 6 a.m. And, I had to discipline my body. I'd always been athletic, but I hadn't disciplined my body in the way that Ashtanga demands of one. And also I had to learn to be in my body and not dissociating from it, which I think was one of the main mechanisms I used to deal with my own insecurities and pains in life. So Ashtanga was an incredibly healing space for me. It was disciplined, which I needed. It was systematic, which I needed. And it got me super grounded. And then the next great boon, you could say, for me was that I found Kundalini yoga from the KRI 3HO tradition. And I was nurtured in that community. Sadhana is nurtured. I was nurtured to do sadhana. I was disciplined to do sadhana. I had a whole community of people around me that were reflecting to me that yoga is so much more than, the vinyasa class you do at the local studio, that yoga is a lifestyle, how you wake up, how you eat, how you conduct yourself, that's all a vital part of yoga. So I'm so grateful for that whole time that I had, really being nurtured by the greater community that had been created around KRI and ultimately what was Yogi Bhajan's teachings. It was the community that nurtured me. And once I flexed that muscle of discipline enough for sadhana, for Kriya practice in the morning, meditation, mantra in the morning, and I could start to see and feel the impact in my life, then I got devoted to it, and it became just something that I do. And so that was, for me, really, I think the second boon was just to have been so held in a community of practitioners that could inspire me to go deeper than I ever thought was possible.
Who was the first proponent of the Ashtanga yoga? How did that come to the West?
That was Pattabhi Jois, who was a student of Krishnamacharya. I think he was maybe Krishnamacharya's first big student in that sense. And he created this very athletic form of yoga, which was, I think originally, he was the yoga teacher to one of the kings, and he used it to, I can't remember the exact story of it, but it was for young boys, it was for young men, it was for people to really discipline and focus and hone their energy. So it became very athletic, and you could say a little bit Martian in nature. All of the pick up, jump back, extraordinary flexibility kind of moves, handstands, those kinds of things all came through the Ashtanga tradition.
Now, you incorporate a lot of different traditions in your teaching, correct?
I do. I do. I just feel like I just share what has worked for me and has worked for the people that I've been teaching, over the last few decades now. So I recognize that we need a really good physical practice. We all do. We need to keep our body strong, especially in this world where we're sitting a lot, we're driving a lot. We're in a more sedentary lifestyle, many of us. We need the practice that moves our energy. And I love the Kriyas from Kundalini Yoga. I love them because they're a sequence of exercises that use the physical body really to activate the pranic body, the energy body. And I think that again is something that we so badly need, because when we start to change the the voltage and the frequency of the pranic body, a lot of the old stored, especially emotional blockages start to get released. I cried for the first 3 years of my Kriya practice. It just moved stuff through me. So I'm really grateful for that. I include that. And I love mantra. I've loved mantra. I think I've loved it since the very first mantra I ever heard. I was walking on the banks of the Ganges, and I heard a mantra being sung, and I went right over to where there was a whole group of Indian people, actually, and it ended up that they were Sri Sri Ravi Shankar students, and they were chanting the Gayatri, and it was at an ashram just further downriver on the same side from Paramath Nikitan. And they just invited me in, and I sat with them, and I had a transcendental experience just listening and sitting in the middle of them all chanting the Gayatri mantra. I became so deeply immersed in the moment. I hadn't had that experience like that before, and it profoundly, deeply moved me. And then I was in love with mantra. I went and bought one of those little cassette tapes, because this was in 98, I think. And that's what they were selling. I asked them for the Gayatri mantra. I got it. I didn't realize it was going to be the Gayatri mantra through the whole A side of the tape and the whole B side, because that would never be. It wouldn't be like that in the West. You'd have all the different songs. It was just the Gayatri mantra. And so I learned it that way. I just put the tape on and it just played, and I learned it.
I noticed that you go to India every year now, correct?
I do, yes.
You're in India every year. And how important do you think for aspiring teachers to be able to immerse themselves in the Indian culture and understand more of what they're teaching by going over there and diving in? How important is that to you?
Wow, it's such a good question. It's such a good question. I don't know how easy that is to answer, in an objective way, because it's so subjective to me. Like I love India. I've always felt drawn there. And I feel like anytime I go to Rishikesh, it feels like my home. And so I love to take people there and turn them on to the space, where the rishis used to walk, and some of them still do walk, not in the obvious ways, but their energy is there, the greater field around there, and also Khajuraho, where I've spent quite a lot of time. There's a certain energy field that you can tap into. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to be necessarily objective about it, but I feel like there's a lot of people who get the India calling, and they know they have to go. And I think to really understand the where the culture comes from, it is important. Like for me, going to India,
Yeah.
I see, and I know you see this too, right? It's just the devotion in people. It's something that we're just not very good at in the West.
Yeah.
Not good at bowing our heads.
Or doing a pranam on the floor to each other. So I think it's really important that people are able to experience that and get an understanding of that, and then take it back with them to their daily practice and their teaching. Because I notice a lot of people teaching nowadays, they have no understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, for example, or Bhakti or anything like that. They just jump in and, they're so far removed from Sanatana Dharma. It's scary, that it's just an exercise for them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, my thing has always been, it's an exercise until you stabilize and purify yourself enough that your mind starts to clear and you begin to seek or see things slightly differently. And then perhaps things that you didn't think that would be interesting to you, like studying the Bhagavad Gita or like studying, Eastern philosophy, it becomes more interesting. So that's sort of the way that I look at it. I definitely see since COVID that the studios that are popping up the most are power yoga. So people, who had been isolated and stuck in their homes, really feeling like they need the heat, the detoxification, the sweat, the intensity of those hot yoga classes. And what I'm hoping to see more of, are the community style studios that are building community around yoga as a lifestyle. Because I feel like that's the missing piece for so many practitioners. They need, just when they get to understand, see, I feel like in the West, we do with yoga what we do with medicine, and we isolate everything out. There's meditation over here, there's deep, extreme breath practice over here, there's asana here, there's, whatever, it's all isolated and split out. And so if you don't do it as an integrated practice, it's hard to truly live it. Because if you're doing meditation, but you're not in a process of studying the ancient texts and you're not understanding the philosophy that supports it, then you're finding moments of calm in your meditation, but how deeply are you able to understand how to work with your mind in that self-reflection, self-correction way? And then what is your philosophy and what are your values in how you're living life, which, as we know with the Bhagavad Gita, is so beautifully laid out and so important that we understand. And when we do all this breath work, it's like, okay, what are you really seeking with the breath work? And then how do you stabilize the states of consciousness you access with the breath work if you don't have a steady meditation practice and a deeper understanding of, the ultimate goal of what it is that you're doing? And so I feel like the more we can begin the integrative process in the West of bringing all these things together, I think that's going to be so helpful for people rather than seeing them as isolated practices.
Absolutely. You just laid it out exactly the way it should be. And there shouldn't be any fear when one enters into that. So you do some breath work and a lot of stuff comes up and you become fearful. Normal tendency is then to close down again. Because you don't want to face those shadows. But breaking through and letting go and going deeper into those situations, you're going to come out a much more healthier being, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then having community around you, a community of people who are committed as you are, to growth, to excellence, to greater awareness, and having that reflection. I think that's a very important piece too. That was the most important, perhaps, for me when I was starting to go deeper, that I was in a community of such dedicated practitioners that it was obvious that that was the lifestyle that I wanted.
How important, continuing that thread, how important do you think are teachers and gurus? It's such a vast controversy over gurus and teachers, and it's been like that for hundreds of years. It's nothing, thousands of years, all the way back to Muhammad and Jesus and Buddha. I mean, this has been on and on because it's been mixed up in this religious, political, arena that gets very confusing for people to separate that and to be able to just get what you need. So I always felt that going to a teacher and taking the good stuff from what they teach you and let the politics and the other stuff, keep that aside. It's always going to be there. It has nothing to do with me. So don't identify with it. Don't get caught up in it. So how does that work for you?
Well, that's just so wise, exactly what you just said, being able to take being able to take the good, that's which is resonant with your heart, and being able to leave the politics aside, because it seems inevitable pretty much that whoever it is that has power and magnetism and a high value access point to yogic knowledge and wisdom, that there's politics that grows up around them on some level or another. And so being able to sort that out without personalizing some of the experiences that you get in the community, it's so important. That's not an easy thing to do. I know, for example, well, I would love to hear from your perspective, because you're one of the most heartfelt, devoted people that I know. Your devotion to Amma, your devotion to your teachers, that has driven you. I would love to hear your perspective on that. Because you've managed to keep a very clear line, it feels, of devotion in that way without the politics being involved.
Well, I know that I go into it knowing, yes, there's flaws and this and that about everybody.
Yeah.
It's not for me. Our minds are so judging all the time.
Yes.
We get into a situation, and the first thing that comes up is our judgment, And I think we can't keep on going back to that place of, oh, I like this, I don't like that, look at that, and look at him, and look at her, and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Who cares? What are you here for? Are you here to sit in the back of the room and judge everybody? I mean, who are we to judge anything? We can only judge our own selves, and we can only change our own selves. And I adapted that a long time ago. And I'm not here to change anything. I realized that, from dysfunctional relationships in my family and dysfunctional marriages, where all we were trying to do is, I want to change you, you want to change me, you're not doing this for me, I'm not doing this for you. On and on and on and on. It just keeps on going until it doesn't go anymore. And then you turn around and say, what's the sense of continuing this? Because it's not working. It's not working because you're trying to change the situation instead of reflecting on your own self.
It's so good, Sridhar. It's so good. It's exactly that. It's exactly that. And the amount of times I feel like we go into communities like that and we find ourselves playing a role, or we project onto the teacher a parent role or something like that, and we get into the same dysfunctional patterns that we had in our home life. And so yeah, that's for me, being able to sit, as you said, in a way, just mind your own business and, be clear about why you're there, and being able to tune into the purity of what really is there. It's so important. That's the same for me in any class, in any practice. Why am I there? And am I going to just go through the motions of this practice so I can tick it off my list and say, oh, I've practiced today, and my spiritual ego can feel good that I've practiced? Or am I really going to immerse myself in the moment and feel like, well, what is here for me today? And who is the me who's having this experience? And how do I relate to that part, or to that wholeness rather than part, perhaps, and get out of the turning, spinning, judging, analyzing, compartmentalizing mind? Boy, is that just a journey. It's just a journey and a refinement.
Every day is a new day. Here we are again.
Here we
just
are.
Wake up. Has nothing to do with yesterday. Now I'm not even remembering yesterday, because I don't know what happened, but I'm not remembering it at all. But the fact of the matter is, who cares, right?
Exactly.
Here it is right now. How you're going to handle life right now. It's in front of you. This is the only thing that's going on. The future is right now. So why are you even worried about the future, right?
Yeah.
We're so consumed all the time. Oh, yesterday, and look what happened. I got into this and this and that. And that takes up all our time.
Yeah.
And then, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? I need to get this. I need to do this. And I go, pop. Okay, here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take that breath, let it go, and say, okay, don't be afraid of the moment. See, which is the key here in sadhana, I think, is not to be afraid of the moment, because the moment creates a lot of fear for people.
It does. It does. I've been reflecting on this in my own practice lately because I've been moving around a lot, you know, touring and stuff. And so just noticing that subtle aggravation underneath the consciousness, and seeing how that subtle aggravation just keeps the mind wanting to look out, versus turning in. Of course, for me in this context, when I turn in, I see, oh gosh, there's like angst under here. There's a fear, there's a feeling that now is not okay for some reason. And so being able to really settle into that. And I think that's huge for all of us. Noting, I'm getting familiar with what those underlying fears are that are keeping us in a perpetual state of movement, at least mental movement, if not physical movement, and learning how to be comfortable, to find that ease in the moment where we can get spacious and be more intuitive and feel that life really is happening for us. It's not happening to us, and that there's a grace to it when we can get into that place.
I think
Yeah.
grace is super important. Grace.
Yeah.
Super important.
Yeah.
And faith.
And faith, because if you don't have faith, boy, does that underlying angst tend to work you. If you don't have faith, and if you don't have that commitment and steadfastness to keep up your practice. See, what I notice about sadhana is it's not a one and done, or it's not a, 10 and done or a 20 and done. It's an ongoing, ever necessary, subtle refinement, so that we can simultaneously be in the world, but not of it. I feel like from phases for me when I'm so much in the world and my energy is pouring outward, it takes time to reestablish and recenter and find the depth inward that can match the outward flow. And so sadhana and practice being something that, if we want to stay, I think if we really want to stay in the space of grace, we just got to keep doing the work to stay in balance. Yeah.
Something from the Bhagavad Gita. The whole purpose of every experience, every activity, every faculty is to turn the human being inward and lead him back to his divine source.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Otherwise,
tell me about, go ahead,
oh no, I was just going to say, otherwise we're just trying to solve the riddle of who we are by outer circumstances, and things get so complicated that way.
Don't be afraid of the change, because the change is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us might take longer, some of us might take shorter. And it's not up to us. You get into a class, you have 50, 60 students there. Some are getting it and some are not getting it, but they're all getting it.
Yeah, at whatever level they can receive. Yeah.
Everybody gets it at their own time.
Yeah.
And it's not for us to accelerate your time.
That's right. Yeah, that's not our responsibility. I think that's very important as a teacher to recognize that it's none of it is because of what we do. We just happen to be a catalyst in the moment for whatever, a facilitator in the moment, but everything that is happening is coming through the intention, the presence, the grace of of the individual, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all going through the same stuff. There's not a person that's dealing with anything that we're not all dealing with. You know, it's just, we have a set of situations that come when you're born in this body, and you're working on them until you leave this body. And we all got the same list. Nobody has a different list, right? It's how you chalk off the numbers on the list and how you deal with those in a dharmic, right, clean, beautiful way.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really working. Let's talk a little bit about relationships. You've been in a long time relationship with a wonderful man. And I know you also, and I also, we also always go through ups and downs in relationships. And that a perfected situation. Right? In the past, for me, when relationships didn't work out, I didn't have the abilities or the technique or the knowledge to stick it through. So when these difficulties came up, the first place we go to is, okay, it's not working, I'm going to leave. Then on the other hand, it's not working, or this is not working, and that, how can I get it to another level of at least peacefulness and being able to work it out? How do you work? How do you do all that? I think our audience would like to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. Tommy and I just celebrated a 20-year wedding anniversary. We've actually been together for 23 years. I'd never made it past 18 months before I met him. So, you know, so it's a victory. I can definitely say that. And there have been highs and there have been lows, and there have been those moments where you're sure that it just has to be over. And I can just say that grace has been a big force in our situation together. I can think of a moment where I was convinced it was over, and then we both were in absolute tears for a long time, and something shifted and a vulnerability showed up, and we were able to communicate things that hadn't been communicated from a different space, to hear each other from a different space. So grace has been a big part. Having help has been a big part. People that could help us, intuitive people who could help us to see what we weren't able to see in the moment. And then a real willingness, I think, for both of us to stay through the fire, where it just feels so hot, so uncomfortable, that you want to run and that you just want to throw in the towel. But well, what we keep coming to is that there's such deep love, and there's such a respect for one another, that so far we've been able to move through those moments in time and to keep getting into a deeper space. But conscious communication is so huge. And for me, who I love to run in the opposite direction or isolate myself if things get hard, just being able to lean in and be in the discomfort and breathe through it and communicate through it has been really, really huge. And inevitably, things get better. You know yourself more, you know the other person more. And what we've been working on in the last few years is communication patterns, and just seeing where we're in a loop, a communication pattern loop, which creates a certain pattern of behavior, and being able to catch it before it happens so that we can create a new outcome. Because when you've been together 23 years, you know, there's certain comfortable patterns that you create, and I think for us, leaning into changing those patterns of communication and behavior has been really helpful. And you know, and it takes work, and it takes awareness, and it's really another kind of sadhana, the sadhana of staying conscious and present in the way that we're relating. And you know, and sometimes it's harder than sadhana, because in your own sadhana, in many ways, you take your own pace. But when there's another person involved, you can't always take your own pace. So that stretches you. That stretches you. I have found that in so much of my energy in my own practice is the transcendent, is the merger, is that. And what I'm learning in relationship is how to find that in this relative reality, as opposed to the comfort of just seeking it in the vertical relationship. Okay, how do I find it in this relating with another? How do I really find that depth of compassion and self-awareness that can allow me to feel free in this moment, loving in this moment, honest with myself in this moment, and not in a space of avoidance. So that's you know, that's work, but very rewarding work for sure.
Do you advocate spiritual counseling as opposed to couples counseling? Let me be clear about that. You know, everybody runs to the therapist for what they consider to be a counseling, and I never have been to a therapist, to be honest with you, in my whole life, because they're just as fucked up as everybody else, and you know. But nowadays there are people that have come forth that are spiritual, so I consider them spiritual counselors, and who are doing the work, are aware. They're aware of the body and the mind and the heart. So,
Yeah.
And so for me, I advocate for them. When I see a couple of friends of mine that are continuously going through the, you know, stuff, try to help them as much as I can, but it's much better for them to be able to weekly go to see somebody and know that that's a arbitrary situation, that the person they're going to see is not for or not for or against either person. They're there
Right.
for the twosome, they're there for the whole.
I love that. And yes, we've been seeing spiritual counselors primarily through our relationship. And it was only in the last years where we actually saw somebody that was in an intuitive relational person who could actually be able to reflect back and say, oh, wait, no, Kia, that's not what Tommy just said. And here's how I heard it. And then be able to do the same thing. So she was coming at it, and she was quite a strong force, which was necessary. She could really cut through those communication patterns in a way that I think both of us needed in that moment. But yes, I agree. The spiritual counseling part, that's what's kept us together. The idea that we're praying at the same altar, that we're supporting each other's spiritual journey. Like, I think that's the primary drive in our relationship at this point, after 23 years, is that we're very aware that what we've been doing on the deepest level all the way through our relationship is supporting each other's individual spiritual growth and holding space for that. And that's been a very important part of the journey.
So the importance of that is that both parties are committed to doing some sort of spiritual work, which also is a rarity. I mean, let's look at that for what it is. Not many couples, two of them dedicated to, you know, diving really deep into their spiritual understanding. So it's like usually the woman or the man, they still have to come home and the other person is not interested.
Yeah.
So where do you go with something like that? What is your recommendation?
It's
people?
interesting, I get asked that a lot by people who come and do the deep dive, courses with me. And, they feel their spirituality blossoming, but then it's not reflected in their partner. And so I think it's, it's a little bit different for everybody. What I do know is that people can be on a very deep journey, but it doesn't have to look like ours. But that if they can at least hold space for us to have our experience and to support. So for example, I think when the partner really supports, say some of the people who come on my trainings and have a big growth spurt, think the husbands or wives, the partners that really support that in them, there's so much room there for the relationship to keep growing. I think it's when one of the partners has fear around what the other is doing and shuts down around it. I think that's really where the greatest challenge is, because you don't want to put yourself back in the box you've been in. Once you've started to grow and have some spiritual realizations, the last thing you want to do is put yourself back in the box. So there's two main scenarios that I see, those relationships that can really grow, even if the people are not doing the same thing. Obviously great if they are. And then there's the realization that if a relationship is operating just on one certain level of consciousness, when one raises above that, it's usually the moment where it's time to let go and move on. So I see that as well. And none of us, who's to know?
It's a very tricky scenario in the world today because it's, it's not like the 60s or the 70s or even the 80s anymore. Now there's some serious stuff going on in the world, and we have to really, all of us, plug in and try to do things quickly. We can't wait another 10, 20, 30 years because we don't have that kind of time.
Right. Yeah. I really recognize this is perhaps one of the biggest challenges that we find. And I know for sure that a lot of women are waking up to themselves at a whole other level right now. And that it requires a certain kind of sensitivity on the part of the partner to support that growth and nurture it, which in turn nurtures the partner and the relationship. So I really see that it's a delicate balance. And for me, having gone through a long-term relationship now and seeing the value in it, the support in it, and the recognition that we have supported each other in being who we are and how we are today. And I can't imagine my life without having had him and that level of support and deep trust and deep love. And that's a real gift. And our spiritual counselors have been the ones who have always seen that and promoted that and encouraged us through the more challenging times to hang in there, because we're both wanting to do the work. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because when you were bringing up the women that are taking some deep dives in your classes, when they leave that course, what do you hear about them when they go back into their world, into their relationships, into their kids? How are they able to manifest that, and how are they able to do better? Are you hearing good responses to that, or they just go back in and same old?
No, I'm hearing great responses because these are people who are taking their daily practice back into their life. And something, by the way, which I've really enjoyed since COVID, is the online trainings where we're live. So as we are right now, we're live a lot of the time, but people are in their homes. They're having this transformative experience, you know, with the group online classes. Then they're getting up and they're engaging with their family. And so there's a deeper integration that's able to happen, and at a different level of what's the word, or just comfort that they feel in the two being in the same space. Oh, I have my yoga practice, I have this spiritual practice, I have this deep, you know, philosophical investigation that I'm doing, and here's my life, and I'm getting to practice what I'm learning immediately.
Right.
So that has been very exciting for me to see how effective it can be when we're not just traveling to an exotic place, having a transcendent experience, going home and feeling a little bit at a loss as to how to integrate it. When we're doing things, as we've been doing a lot, like online, and someone's in their home, it's integrating already, and their home is becoming their sanctuary and their sacred space and their sadhana place. And there's a different sensibility around it. I love that.
Now that you bring it up, I can see the benefit of these online videos and stuff like that. I didn't even look at it that way, but you know, as opposed to when people go on retreats, they get this and then they still have to go home and integrate it. This way they're getting it and they're just turning this way and they're in it, right? Exactly at that moment.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, I just learned this and I just had this experience in myself. Okay, can I really bring this depth of understanding and, you know, compassion and, you know, opening to love? Okay, well, now I'm being faced by an angry child or an angry husband. Can I bring it into this moment? I think that's very real. And of course it happens when we do the, you know, the immersive experiences and you go home, you still have to face that. If you have a daily sadhana, so you're going home with a daily practice, then it can be a lot more effective. It's easier to hold the new frequency state that you accessed in the immersion if you're going home and you're doing a practice that keeps you in that elevated open space. Then you can start to engage with those around you. And you know, I think more often than not, if a partner can see a positive change in you, they're going to support it. And more often than not, if you can change your side of the interaction where it's maybe been contentious and see it from a different perspective, just the law of nature is the other side has to change too, to some degree. So
yeah, they're gonna want to have some of that beauty and love that you're emanating, and instead of battling you and trying to fight you, they're going to say, oh, that's a beautiful thing. I want some of that.
Exactly. Yes.
Get that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You brought up a daily sadhana real quick, and it doesn't have to be too precise. What are your recommendations for beginners only, not somebody that's been doing this a lot? Because I notice when I go out, the world is filled, we're all beginners, you know, so that I can't come to them and start talking to them a deep philosophical discussion because they're not going to understand what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Well, what I know as a beginner, because I remember myself being a beginner, and I know from teaching, you have to move your energy. You know, we are energy beings. And when our energy is in a sort of stagnant state, or our energy is just in an old cycle, an old pattern, there's a certain thinking and feeling that goes with whatever the pattern of your energy is. Now, if you get up in the morning and you shift your energy and you decide how you want to set your state, you decide, oh, I'm going to feel into gratitude this morning. I'm going to feel into being more open. I'm going to feel into whatever it is that you do a practice, you raise your energy state, you feel into how you want to be, and then you go out and be that. You're going to be attracting different circumstances into your life. So for me, I think the most important is that we shift our energy state. So we want to do some kind of asana or dynamic movement, breath work that shakes up our energy, that shifts us. And then we just want to learn how to stabilize ourselves in that more elevated place. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to tune yourself emotionally, because we have a choice, about how we want to feel in any given moment. Okay, and gratitude seems to be that one emotion that opens the door for so many others. If we can just be grateful after our practice and feel into that, that's going to change our perception of the whole rest of the day, if we can hold that, or open ourselves to gratitude, or just be in the appreciation of the moment. So for me, I think if we do that every day, we're going to start to be able to intuitively make choices that keep us in greater alignment with that state of gratitude. And the way to that is just, you've got to move your energy. You've got to move your energy. You've got to change the dominant state that is governed by the unconscious ways of being that you've learned your whole life. If you want to break out of that unconscious momentum, you've got to change your energy state, stabilize yourself emotionally, how you want to be, set your intention, and then go about your day. So for me, beginning of the day practices are huge. And then end of the day practices are a good way to just change and let go of whatever stress of the day you may have gathered, so that you can slide into sleep in a calmer, more receptive place. You're going to have a deeper sleep. You're going to wake up feeling more rested, with less dream turmoil, if you clear your mind before you go to sleep. So thinking of those two, bookending your day, I think that's a good thing to do.
When I start my sadhana in the morning, I ask for forgiveness each morning, and I pray for openness and love and harmony for myself and for my family. And thankful for giving me another day to be able to serve, to feel compassion to other people, and to honor and love everybody. And also always praying to my mother and father and my grandparents and all the souls that came before me, for giving me another day to be able to do this.
I love that. I love that.
I think we always have to make reference to how we actually got here in a physical form, even though we don't pretty much follow much of any of that, But we have so much more to talk about, but we're actually out of time. I just want to leave with this little question here, this little statement. Whoever has God in mind, simple and solely God in all things, such a man carries God with him into all his work and into all places, and God alone does all his work. He seeks nothing but God. Nothing seems good to him but God. He becomes one with God in every thought. Just as no multiplicity can dissipate God, so nothing can dissipate this man or make him multiple. Yoga is skill in action, okay? Renounce and enjoy.
Yes, I love that.
Thank you so much, Kia Miller. I love you. We're going to see you in Bhakti Fest. How do people find out more about you? What is your website?
KiaMiller.com or Kia Miller Yoga for social media. Yeah, that's how you find me. And you can find me on GLO.com. I have about 400 and something classes on there. You could take a different class every day for a year and a half, pretty much.
And what is that, yogaglow.com?
Yeah, you could do Yoga Glow or just GLO is how they have it these days, just glow.com.
Okay, and then on your own website, they can find out where you're going to be. I know where
Yes.
you're going to be in September because you're going to be with
I'm
us at Bhakti Fest.
so excited, and I'm excited for the pre-day, pre-Bhakti Fest immersion. So any of you listening, please come and dive deep on the Thursday of Bhakti Fest. Yes.
And Tommy Rose, and it's going to be a magnificent day. Thank you so much, Kia. I love you. I appreciate you. And big hugs to Tommy, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Sridhar ji. Much love.